Thank
Cool.
you so much.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So let's hop in. I'm going to begin with a question that I've been using in the beginning for a long time. 6 years ago, this pandemic changed our lives, changed the world. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you ask about that because when thinking back on that, that's also when we shifted from doing therapy in person to also incorporating more virtual sessions, right? And I think that was like very helpful, in
Yeah.
particular for me, because um, um, like I have asthma, so I was like freaking out with like the whole pandemic, the whole like not knowing how bad it could get for each person individually. So my anxiety was through the roof. My hair started like actually falling out.
Yeah.
And the ways I started to cope with all of that were by playing video games, also doing a lot of exercise,
Yeah.
and feeling empowered to make the best decisions about the work that I was doing. Um, um, and also having the support to do that as well, which was, kind of like volunteering for all of the virtual sessions and stuff like that, and kind of like piloting all of the programs and the softwares and stuff like that. So, yeah, I feel like reclaiming control over my behaviors and what I could do to make it easier for myself, that really helped me.
So talk to me a little bit about you've gone from therapy into coaching. Talk to me a little bit about your career a little bit. I'm going to put you in front of 12-year-olds. It's career day, and the kid in the back of the room wants to know what you do for a living. How do you answer them?
Yeah. Um, uh, so I am a trauma therapist by training. And when I think about trauma, I always like to explain it as anything that flips your world upside down, anything that feels really, really difficult, and that sometimes it leaves really long-lasting consequences. But I am going into coaching as a way of supporting women specifically who have gone through really hard stuff at work, who have felt invisible, who have felt like they don't matter, and like are constantly doing and performing for their workplace without credit, without appreciation, without anything in return. So I'm supporting women now and recovering their power over their careers and feeling like they matter. A client of mine has mentioned that she felt like a part of her was dying at her old workplace, right? And now she feels alive. She feels, vivacious and like happy. Even her husband mentioned, I'm so happy to get my wife back, right? So all those things are the reason as to why I do the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about both therapy and coaching.
So let's find out how you got into therapy and coaching. Take me back to your beginnings. What did you want to be when you were at that career day place in your life? What was your dream job when you grew up?
Yeah. So I had three options, and I think this was like all the way back in high school. I wanted to be a chemical engineer, or a journalist, or a therapist.
Okay.
And I knew exactly that if I wanted to have more contact with people, I needed to just go into therapy,
Yeah.
right? And I remember even saying to like the psychologist at the school back then, or the school counselor back then, and this was in Venezuela, by the way. So like I am from Venezuela,
Yeah.
so I went to school over there. And I remember saying to her, I just want to be that one person that is actually supportive and doesn't have an agenda for someone that doesn't have anyone.
Yeah.
So that is what actually like guided my decision into going into therapy.
So talk to me a little bit about growing up in Venezuela and growing up in general. What were some of the traits, the seeds that were planted that made you want to get into therapy? What were those things that you either saw or that inspired you to get into that line of work?
Well, growing up over there, was hard and also like very happy. In fact, While we were growing up, my brother and I guess, we never thought about even leaving our country. We were happy. We had everything that we needed. My dad was very successful in his work and all of that. So it's kind of like shocking now to see us in a completely different country when we were happy over there, right? But in Venezuela, we don't really talk too much about mental health. And in fact, I remember one time I went to a therapist and I was already kind of like grown, and the therapist fell asleep during my session. I was like, I am never doing that.
Wow.
So yes, I feel like, a part of my training happened over there in a way. As to like also the ways that I didn't want to show up as in sessions, but most of the work that I have done has happened here, of course, and that's what drives how I show up in sessions.
So I got to say, before we move on, our patron saint here in Kansas City is Salvador Perez. We love him, and he's from Venezuela. So that's yeah, yeah,
I've never heard of him.
yeah. He's our catcher. He was the MVP of our World Series in 2015. He's one of the happiest guys on the planet. We love him. He's our guy. So
Oh
yeah.
gosh. Well, thank you for mentioning that. I'm gonna have to look him up.
Yeah, totally do. Yeah. And Venezuela is under the microscope now with everything that's going on, all the craziness. So I'm curious, what prompted you to come to America?
Everything that was happening.
Yeah.
Yes. So back then, we still had Chavez, right? Who was like initially started as our president in 1999 and then turned into this dictator that changed our constitution, changed and took over like all of the powers, governmental powers and all of that. Started like prosecuting people for having a voice, for disagreeing with him and things like that, right? So a lot of that. And I think that what actually prompted my parents to decide to just like actually leave was that he said the children in Venezuela were no longer going to like belong, quote unquote, to their parents, right? That they were going to belong to the government and that they were going to decide what the children were going to become, where they're going to be at, all of that, right? So I think back then I was already kind of like almost close to being 18. So my parents were not as worried about me, but my brother is 4 years younger than me. So they started kind of like freaking out about my brother and my dad also. From way back in the day, he knew Chavez from like working with him in some capacity. And he knew that from the beginning, we should not even vote for him, kind of thing. And he alerted everybody, but in our family, but I mean, he still won. So.
Wow. Do you see? I mean, there's a lot of things that are starting to happen in this country that are like what you've explained. It's getting to a place that's quite frightening. So I,
Exactly.
I wonder if there is there a part of you that's living through this right now that's having PTSD with what you came from?
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how many marches I went to, how many times I had to run away from like police and the National Guard, right? And kind of like also like going into that thinking, well, if something happens, I just rather die kind of thing than they take me, right? Which, now like also as a mom, I think about like death and dying and all of that, and I'm like, no, I don't want to
Yeah.
die, right? But back then, when you're kind of like, a teenager, early at 20s kind of thing, you're not thinking so much about that. You're thinking about, making a difference. You're thinking about like recovering your country and
Yeah.
all of that, right? So yeah, and I remember my friends and I, so I went to college over there partially. My friends and I would go and meet at our university, and then from there, we actually wouldn't go to class. We actually would go to the marches. I remember this one time, my dad came with me, and I told him like, "You don't worry about me. I will be running if something happens. You will find me all the way up there. We'll find each other in this building. don't worry about me. Because I knew that if he was worried about me, something could happen to the both of us. And so I told him that, and it happened, right? And then we ended up like finding each other in the building. But yeah, so it's very, very similar. And in fact, my mom, my dad, and I are thinking about, like, wow, it's kind of like, and my brother too, reliving all of these experiences from back then. And it's sad.
Yeah.
And it's sad to like even think about like having to start over elsewhere
Yeah.
too, because you know, it's frightening.
I bet. So, who's been your inspirational force in your life that's allowed you to find your profession, to come to America, to give people hope? What has been that for you, that heroic force in your life?
So I definitely admire my parents for like everything that they have sacrificed and everything that they have gone through. My parents lived in poverty for a very long time until, I think like my brother was born. So I don't remember that time back then because I was too little, but roughly when my brother was born is when my dad actually got a really good job and started kind of like progressing. But he got to a place where he was really successful and then having to leave all of that behind because of your children and because you like know that things are getting bad, right? But also you're questioning your own fear too, but you still make the difficult choice, right? And that's something that I actually like say to my clients too, right? Yes, fear is functional and helps us survive. And sometimes we have to do the hard thing even when we're scared,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I feel like that really has been a force for me and really powerful. And I think it really drives me forward as well.
So, coming out of trauma therapy, obviously you're dealing with a lot of heavy stuff. Was there a lightening of the load segueing into coaching? Did you get out of a lot of heavy stuff and kind of, has it been relieving to refocus, or has there been any difference?
Yeah. So I still do a lot of like the trauma pieces in my coaching, right? I absolutely love working with trauma. It's my passion. So I have incorporated a lot of that into my coaching, but it is definitely different. Especially when I have primarily worked in like the sexual violence field, right? We don't see that as much in the coaching piece, but my focus with coaching is workplace trauma healing,
Yeah.
right? So there is still a component of like the trauma, the relieving the experiences, the rushing thoughts, the way in which you change the way in which you think about yourself, about the world, and you within the world, right? There's a lot of pain and struggle and hyperactivation as well in the coaching that I do, and that you know, all of that is stuff that I treat and support people in getting the coping skills and regulating their nervous system to actually be successful.
So, what was one of the first early coaching victories that you had where you realized that segueing out of therapy and into coaching made sense? That was the change you needed. Did you have a moment like that?
So my first client actually said to me that, in just 3 sessions with me, she had accomplished more than she had in 18 plus years of therapy. So
Wow.
that was pretty powerful for me, right? And I think it really made me look at coaching as also kind of like the other side of the same coin as therapy, right? So therapy is more focused on let's dive into, your past experiences, the root of the issues, right? And kind of like process. I like to think about it as kind of like peeling an onion kind
Yeah.
of thing. Coaching is more goal focused, solution focused, oriented towards reaching your goals. So it's like full on giving you all the tools that you need to get to where you want to be.
So doing whether it's therapy or coaching, you have to get into the human mind and psychology, which can be very dirty. It can be very murky. How do
Yeah.
you protect yourself every day? Take care of your own soul, deliver your product at a high level. What is it when that alarm clock goes off that makes you do all that at a high level?
Yeah. So I guess I have been doing this for so many years. I mean, over a decade at this point. And in the beginning, I did let it get to me quite a bit because it is really hard as a new therapist, as a new provider, to separate their experiences from your experiences, right? But I have learned throughout my career that I cannot take on their pain because I cannot be helpful to them, all right? I find ways to connect with them while still knowing that I am an individual and that they are an individual, right? And we can both show up authentically without absorbing each other's pain, each other's struggle, kind of thing, so that I can be there as a sounding board, right? Where I can support them from a place of being regulated and also model that for them. Granted, I also have my own self-care. That includes definitely my husband, my children, right? And I have three toddlers, so they really keep me busy. And they drive me nuts sometimes, but I absolutely love them to death, and they are also my main motivation and like what drives me as well.
So have you been in Iowa the whole time you've been in America?
Pretty much. So we actually moved to Houston for literally like 3 months. That's it.
So what kind of culture shock was that coming from Venezuela to Iowa?
Oh my God, it was so shocking. I still remember, people saying like, "Oh, let's go to the beach." And I was how are we going to get to the beach? What do you mean? Oh no, the lake. That's not the beach.
Right.
Right? Especially when, I was in college in Venezuela and my friends and I would like play soccer in the morning and then drive to the beach that same day. And in 2 hours, you would get to the beach, spend the whole weekend, and then come back and go to school, right? The next day and stuff like that. So it was like shocking to me.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you ran into that version of you right before you left Venezuela to come to America, and you had a book in your hands, and it was the life that you've lived so far, and you handed it over and said, "This is the life that you've had." Would your young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
I think she would struggle to believe it for sure.
Yeah.
Um, especially um, uh, knowing how determined I am with my goals, right? And how I have had to be so flexible while also pursuing my goals, right? And kind of like shift and pivot, and do things in ways that perhaps I never even thought could be possible too, right?
Yeah.
I think that also me being the person that I am right now in this world and what is happening in this country in particular, I feel like, yeah, my younger self would not believe that we are in a similar circumstance as what happened in Venezuela.
So that's I want to hone in on that a little bit. You're reliving levels of strife that made you flee a country, and you're going into a situation where you're seeing those things happening here. But you're clearly hopeful because you're dispensing that through your coaching to your clients. What is it that makes you remain hopeful? I mean, your statement that you're afraid that you may have to restart again, that's frightening, and that should be frightening to every American right now. So my question to you is what keeps you grounded and hopeful to give your kids a better future and to hope that America can turn around?
Yeah, I think that one thing that makes me hopeful is when I see also so many people that maybe are impacted by it directly, maybe not, and engaging in action,
Yeah.
right? When people decide to like really show up for each other and really express their views, express their discontent and their disappointment, and how, what we're going through isn't necessarily like our values, right?
Yeah.
As, Americans. So, yeah, I think that that definitely gives me hope. And, I think that I also hone in on knowing that I have power to then like make my own choices, right? And I hope that everybody also feels the same way, that they have power to make their own choices and decide what works for them and what doesn't.
So, Mary, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, so I think I am a very kind, empathetic person that is always trying to help people, but I'm also really boundaried, to say it that way. I know that I have to have certain boundaries to really show up in the best way possible and in the most authentic way possible with the people around me. So, yeah, I think that that's who I am. And I'm really driven, persistent, motivated, and really, yeah, family oriented, relationships and connections oriented.
What's the best thing about living in Iowa?
Oh, good question. No, I'm kidding. I absolutely love, honestly, getting home within 20 minutes,
Yeah.
right? Getting to work within 20 minutes, right? The no traffic, the like, yeah, I feel like it's like you have everything kind of like nearby
Yeah.
too. And like, yeah, I think that that is the best thing about Iowa.
I love it. So, Mary, if anyone's ready for your sage advice, coaching, any of the wonderful work that you're putting out in the world, where can they go? Where can they find out? How can they talk to you?
Yeah. So you can always email me at Mary@mindtothrive.com, or you can just find me on Facebook at Mary Eldridge, LCSW. You can also join my Facebook group where I actually facilitate weekly free trainings on different topics that actually my participants get to choose. I give them three options every Monday, and then they decide what they want to learn about, and that is called the Career Empowerment Collective. So, yeah,
Okay. I will put all these links in the show notes. Mary, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. It's particularly so relevant with what the world, what's going on in the world. And every time I hear these stories, it gives me more hope. So I think we're going to have a better tomorrow. So we'll just keep the faith.
thank you, Joe. I
Thank
am
you.
so thankful for this space, and thank you to every listener to be
Thank you.
here.